This is an edited version of an introduction to general semantics for beginners presented at Doon University in India in December 2016. It is the first part of a workshop based on the Book of Radical General Semantics. The Book of Radical General Semantics. The discipline of general semantics was founded by Alfred Korzybski around 1933. Korzybski proposes that the pathologies of our civilization, wars, genocides, ecological catastrophes, and so on, are closely related to a fundamental flaw in the deep grammar of our civilization. It has been called the lethal fundamental error. This flaw also underlies many faulty evaluations by so-called normal individuals in their personal lives. Korzybski called the fundamental error identification. The identification of our maps of what is going on with reality. The confusion of maps with territories. Identification constructs a damaged life world, dominated and therefore twisted and distorted by conceptualization, generalization, definition. The project of general semantics is to explore and remediate, and so to contribute to a radical transformation in the direction of sanity toward the adulthood of humanity. The first principle of general semantics, the map is not the territory. Whatever you say it is not it. Introduces a set of practices which can be studied and lived by every human being, beginning in childhood. The most important of these practices is practice with the structural differential. This is a simple version of the structural differential, a device which trains us to differentiate and then to reintegrate three levels of existence which are normally not distinguished in our living processes. The event level, what is going on behind and beyond our perception. The object level, this, says Korzybski, is where we live. It is the level of actual experience. And these are the label levels, the levels of symbolization and conceptualization, which organize and make sense of our experience. An introduction to general semantics for beginners. To begin with, we'll be focusing on the structural differential. This is a structure. So there have been many different versions that have been produced by Korzybski and by other students of general semantics. And it's a differential. It differentiates. It's a structural differential which differentiates aspects of structure. The main aspects are the event level. I'll talk more about this as we go along. And the object level, which is the circle there. The label levels, which come up and rejoin the structural differential at the top. You see this arrow? So it's not a static image, it's a dynamic image. It's moving. It's constantly moving like this. Event level, that's what is going on. The object level, our sensory experience. Label level, what we say about our experience, our concepts and theories, explanations and descriptions of what is going on. And they go up to the top there and become a part of what is going on. So this kind of circular and self-referential structural differential. Differential in the sense that it differentiates levels, but it also brings them together. So it differentiates and integrates It doesn't simply differentiate. You're going to understand that a lot better as I move along. There are many different versions, as I've said, and if you go to Google structural differential, you'll probably find quite a few different versions of the structural differential there, as diagrams and as sculptures. Now this is one that was put together by one of my students. His name was Scott Bezo. I remember his name because he brought this to class one day. I was asking students to make their own versions of the structural differential and bring them to class. I'll explain later why it's important to make your own versions. I suggest you yourselves do it. So at the top here, we have the event level, which is, as you can see, is open at the top. It's a parabola which is open at the top. And it is a map of what is going on outside and inside the skin. So this is a map of what is going on inside and outside the skin, but inaccessible to our immediate perception or cognition. For example, the whirl of subatomic particles. It's not visible, audible, touchable, but according to our science, that's what's going on at the event level. Our science is represented by the highest label level. So the highest label level tells us, in terms of the theory of the day, what is going on beyond and behind our perception or cognition. Let me just tell you a little bit more about the event level. And this is what is going on behind and beyond our immediate experience and perception, all the way from the swirl of subatomic processes through the pre-human and human biological and social processes up to this moment, all the way to the most immense cosmic processes up to this moment. It's sometimes called the process level. This is a parabola open at the top, showing that these processes go on incessantly, so that reality is never fixed, closed, or finished. And we put reality in quotes. We prefer to say what is going on, because reality seems to be a kind of fixed thing. But what is going on, it's process. And we may have different definitions or views of reality. We could argue about what reality is, but nobody can argue that something is going on. So if we call it what is going on, that's indisputable, that something is going on. So the event level is where it's going on, prior to our experience of what is going on. It's important to remember that the event level is not at all, as such, accessible to our perception. Whatever knowledge we have of the event occurs at levels of sensation, perception, and cognition derived from the event, that is abstracted from the event, so that what we have here are levels of abstraction. So these are levels of abstraction. Our sensory experience is abstracted from the event. In other words, a small part of what is going on is received and transformed by our senses. And that's what we call the object level. What we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we touch, what we taste, what we feel, inside and outside the skin. These are abstracted from the event level. Korzybski emphasizes a lot that the term abstraction means that much is left out. When we abstract from the event level, much is left out. And these strings, there are strings that are coming out of the event level. Some of them reach the object level, but some do not. So we only receive, in terms of sensory experience, a small part of what is going on. And we don't receive it only in the sense that we receive a small part of it. It's also transformed by our nervous system. So what we experience at the object level is not only abstracted from the event level, it's also what we might call a neurological transformation of what is going on at the event level. So that, for example, it's one of my favorite examples, because I'm an auditory person. You've heard the riddle, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it still make a sound? The answer is it makes no sound, because it will make a sound only if there is an ear which can transform what is going on into sound. Now, according to our science, which is the highest label level, which rejoins the event level at the top, according to our science, what is going on is air pressure waves. But no one experiences an air pressure wave. We experience a sound, which is what happens when our auditory nervous system is impacted by the air pressure wave. So there's an example there of the relationship between what is going on at the event level and what we experience at the object level. The holes in the event level, which you can see there, and which you can also see here, maybe you can see them here. Scott punched a whole bunch of holes in there. Each of those holes, which appear on the diagram as points, you see, but in the actual structure they are holes, stand for characteristics of what is going on. We shall see later that characteristics actually means relations, because according to our science, beginning with Einstein, there is no such thing as a freestanding characteristic. Every so-called characteristic is actually a coming together, in interactive terms, it's a relationship. The strings which drop down from the holes are of two kinds, those which lead to the first level of abstraction, the object level, and those which do not. This shows that most of what is going on at the event level does not reach the brain nervous system. One of the meanings of the terms abstraction is leaving out. Only a small number of characteristics of the event impact on the brain nervous system. Most are left out. They do so, this impact happens at the object level. So the object level is the object of, it's the level of experience. Here, a few characteristics of the event are transformed by the nervous system into that which is seen, heard, felt, smelled, tasted, etc. The object level, says Korzybski, is where we live. At the object level, you are the living, breathing being, seeing, hearing, etc., moving, aging, and dying. It's important to remember that what we see, hear, feel, etc., is not a copy or representation or picture of what is going on at the event level. It's not a mirror of nature, which is Richard Rorty's term for dismissing this notion. We don't have a mirror of nature. We have a neurological transformation of what is going on. The best known statement in general semantics you may have heard already in some other context. The map is not the territory. How many of you have heard this expression before even hearing about general semantics? The map is not the territory. Okay, some of you have. It's all that's left of general semantics in the world of conventional discourse. People don't know where it comes from, and they actually don't really know what it means. They think, most of them, that it means, yeah, you can make mistakes. But it's actually much deeper phrase than that as we explore it. Thus far in our journey through the structural differential, we have learned that the object is not the event. And Korzybski thought it was very important, and this is one of the reasons he invented this. By the way, it came to him in a flash of insight, as often happens to geniuses who are working on something and they don't know how to formulate it, and it comes to them maybe in a dream or in a flash of insight. That's the way the structural differential, the whole thing, Korzybski says, appeared to him in one flash of insight. For example, the sky is blue. Who could debate that? But with the structural differential, you know that the sky is not blue, because blue happens at the object level. And the sky happens at the event level, or what we call the sky happens at the event level. The sky is blue only for a more or less normal human visual nervous system. It looks different to dogs. It looks different to colorblind humans. etc., etc., etc. If there are aliens out there who are trying to reach us at this very moment, if they have very different nervous systems, which they may very well have, very different nervous systems from us, then the statement the sky is blue could be completely meaningless to them. Okay? They could have a completely different set of sensory apparatus with which to make sense of what is going on. So the experience of blueness, our science tells us, is the result of the impact of light waves on the retina. Now the highest label level at the top of the structural differential stands for that which our sciences and other discourses tell us. That is, they theorize at this moment about what is going on. The first label level is simple description. It's what we say about what is going on. This table is hard. Simple description of my experience. The next is what we say about what we say. In some versions of the structural differential, that's called the level of inference.
Yes.
So there's description, then there's inference, and then there's inferences from inferences. So there's what we say about what we say, what we say about what we say about what we say. So it's hierarchical, increasingly abstract levels of abstraction, increasingly abstract label levels, all the way up to the top, which is our highest, Korzybski says, our latest, highest abstractions, the latest findings of our sciences and other ways of making sense in very abstract terms of what is going on. Does anybody know what that is?
What?
The circuit
This
round
one.
thing. Yeah, that's what
Figo.
I was asking.
Sorry?
Figo.
Fido.
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 Not Figo, yeah.
Fido is the name of a dog, according to
Yeah.
Korzybski. Korzybski calls all human beings Smith, and he calls all animals Fido, which is a dog's name in English.
Yeah, so
Although
that is
there's not many
animal
dogs
perception.
named Fido anymore. So the point here is that the animal stops at the object level. The animal just has sensory experiences. This is one of the main reasons Korzybski invented this, was to show the difference between animals and humans. Human beings, Korzybski says, are not animals. They are not a kind of animal. They are a different class of life, a different dimension of life. We go on a tangent here. The animals are what Korzybski calls space binders. They move in space, eating, reproducing, fighting, killing, etc., etc. The human being is a time binder who moves in time, moves in history,
Once you get down to the label down there, why does it go back up to the event?
because it has to circle back, because the whole thing is circular and self-referential. I will say more about that.
That's very interesting.
Right. So from the object level, we have all kinds of label levels of description, inference, explanation, and at the top, these are Korzybski's words, we read our latest, highest abstractions back into what is going on.
Yeah.
So it's circular that way, so the diagram has to represent the circle. And this will represent it in a different way, as I'll show you in a minute.
Is it that because we abstract at the highest level as truth, does that then begin to stand for the event
Yes,
itself?
yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, that's what the Aristotelian orientation would say, that we discover truth. But we never discover truth with a capital T. We
Fine.
keep changing and improving our knowledge.
This object itself,
Yes,
that there is no objective reality out there always. There's a beautiful example in your book at page 214,
yes,
and that's about the rainbow.
the rainbow,
That unless there's a combination of eye at a particular angle
yes,
to the rain and the angle of the sun.
That's right.
So where is the rainbow?
Exactly.
Is it out there
yeah,
or is it in here?
that's
I
right,
think that's a beautiful illustration about what we call object.
that's right. It's a good metaphor. It has its failings also, because I can seize this object, and I can't seize the rainbow. So this is one of the things about language, that a word can have many different meanings. And it can also have many different meanings at many different levels. For example, the word unit. So a unit at this level is one thing. A unit at this level could be the whole set of those units, which is also a unit. A unit at this level could be a whole set of sets of units. So even though you're using a word, unit, which seems to have one meaning, it has different meanings at different levels. The word levels itself, you could have level and levels of levels and levels of levels. This is what Korzybski calls multi-ordinality. Here we might have the label love. Here we might have love of love. Here we might have love of love of love. I don't know how far you can go with that. I can't go much further than this because of my limited brain capacity. All right, so I'm going to give some examples of the neurological transformation of the event into a sensory experience. So it happens here at the object level. This is the neurological transformation of the event of what is going on into a sensory experience. Here we have linguistic transforms. For example, when I transform this sound into the word sound, that's the linguistic transform. Look, the map is not the territory. The word sound is not the same as that. And that is not the same as what our physics tells us is going on. Here's the way I put it. Is this table hard? We can say that at the object level. I mean, we can say that at the label level. About our sensory experience, we can say it feels hard. Because hardness does not inhere in the table any more than blueness inheres in the sky. It would be better to say that the table resists penetration. At the event level, the table is mostly empty space. Solidity is a construction of the human nervous system. Now, solidity is actually not an illusion, but it's an abstraction at the object level from the event level. According to our science, everything at the subatomic level consists of a whirl of atoms and subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons, and others which physics has recently discovered that I forget the names of. Korzybski used to bring a little fan to show to 6th or 7th grade school children. He would show them the fan. He would show them the blades of the fan going round and round and round. And at a certain point in time, the blades would be going around so fast that it would look like a disc, a solid disc. This is a metaphor of the relation between the event level and the object level. It's just a metaphor because it's all at the object level, but it's a metaphor of what's going on between the event and object level. Now maybe I should say a little bit more about the animal object. Animals stop here, they stop here at the object level. Fido stops there. This means that their process of abstraction stops with a neurological transform. They don't proceed to a linguistic translation at the label levels or transformation. They can't describe to themselves, they cannot describe to themselves in language their sensory experience. They can't explain to themselves in language what is going on in their sensory experience. In other words, they are stuck with their sensory experience. That's all they have. Their maps stop there, the object level map of what is going on. That's all they have. But they don't know that it's a map. In Korzybski's terms, they are not conscious of abstraction. Only human beings can be conscious of abstraction. It's a potential, a human potential, which is a very important species-specific characteristic of human beings, which is given to us by our language. It's precisely because we have language with which we can describe our sensory experience that we know that there is a difference. Or we can know that there is a difference between sensory experience and language. That the map is not the territory. That the word is not the thing. But for animals, the map is the territory, the word is the thing, and that's why Korzybski sometimes joked about human beings copying animals, being categorical and dogmatic by taking their experience as reality, by taking what they say as the same as their experience, by taking what they experience as the same as what is going on. That's what he meant by copying animals, because that's what animals do being stuck there. In Korzybski's terms, they must identify the object with the event. They must identify the object with the event. They must make them the same. They cannot be conscious of abstraction. They can't be aware that their sensory experience is abstracted from the event. Tell the dogs that are barking that they hear the other dogs barking because of the impact of sound waves on their ears. Go ahead and try to explain it to them. I'm trying to explain it to you, but you can't even begin to try to explain it to a dog. That's the difference between Smith and Fido. That's the beginning of the difference between Smith and Fido. For animals, there's no way of knowing that the map is not the territory. For human beings, we can know that the map is not the territory, but we usually behave as if we don't know that. We usually behave as if we don't know that. We usually behave without knowing that our blah blah theories are not the same as our sensory experience, and without knowing that our sensory experience is not the same as what is going on. Experience is no longer immediate. It is mediated by language, usually, which consists of words and concepts and symbolizations of all kinds. And this takes us to the next level of abstraction, more precisely the next levels of abstraction, the label levels. And there they are. Here we think, talk, write about our experience. Here is what we say about our experience, and what we say about what we say, and so on ad infinitum, all the way up to the highest label level, the highest level of abstraction, which Korzybski attaches to the event level. Korzybski, we read our highest abstractions into what is going on. And without this, we could have no knowledge of what is going on. We could have sensory experiences, but we could have no knowledge of what is going on. So it's something like this. Here's what is going on. Here's the highest label level. It's attached with a pin or in various other ways. It's read into what is going on. And that enables us to have scientific and other forms of knowledge of what is going on. Thus, our knowledge becomes part of what is going on. The structural differential is recursive, it's self-referential, it refers to itself because the structural differential is at the highest label level. So as we speak here, this is what is happening to you, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, at this moment, the structural differential, it becomes part of what is going on for you. The structural differential is different at every moment, and it's different for every person at every moment. What I'm abstracting from the event level at the object level is different than what you are. And what I'm abstracting from experience into language at this moment for me is different from what you're doing. So it's a very difficult task that Korzybski took on when he created this structure, because it wants to be simultaneously abstract enough to refer to what is going on in general, and concrete enough to refer to what is going on for every individual specifically at a specific moment of time. At some points in Science and Sanity, he says the structural differential is a cross-section of a moment in time. So the strings which hang down from the object level without reaching the label level pertain to characteristics of our sensory experience which are not linguistically transformed. And later, with some tasks I will assign, you'll be able to have experiences of the nonverbal world with minimal interference from language, which is a part of the mission of general semantics. It doesn't stop there, but it's an essential part of the mission of general semantics, that I should be able to experience that without immediately translating it as, oh, solid matter, oh, my fist striking solid matter, those are the words. This is the experience. The only way the experience can be conveyed without words is for me to do that. And when I do that, you sort of, with your empathic powers, have the same experience for yourselves, whether you're actually knocking the table or not. So you see the connecting strings there. Some of them reach the label levels, but some of them don't. Now the diagram is not accurate because many more strings hang free at both parts. There are many more strings from the event level hang free. The vast expanse of what is going on, we don't even reach for the purposes of abstraction. And vast parts of our object level experiences don't reach our languaging, which is part of the problem with language. Because language is simultaneously blessing and curse. And general semantics is meant to sort of amplify the blessing aspect and reduce the curse aspect. One of the principles of general semantics then is not only that the map is not the territory, but that the map cannot stand for all the territory. In general semantics, that's the principle of non-allness. That's the second commandment of general semantics. It has 3 commandments. The map is not the territory, the map does not stand for all of the territory, and the map is self-reflexive. That's the third and most difficult rule to grasp, that the map is a map of the map maker, self-reflexivity. So the word is not the object. The label is not the object. See, you're learning this right now whether you like it or not. The label is not the object. The word is not the same as the thing. The label is not the same as the object. They're so different. And the object is not the event. The thing is not the processes going on behind the thing which make it the thing that it is. So the map is not the territory. The label map is not the object territory, and the object map is not the event territory. Now the label levels are the treasure of humanity. They are our heaven as well as our hell. Because we could not exist as linguistic beings without language. We live in language, or as Heidegger put it, language is the house of being. The label levels summarize, they summate, they organize, they stabilize, and they give conceptual meaning to our sensory experience. It is language or symbolization which has made cultural and scientific evolution possible. However, according to Korzybski, human cultural evolution has so far failed, and failed miserably, to realize the potential of consciousness of abstraction. He says, in his words, we continue to copy animals in the sense of identifying our sensory and cognitive maps with reality. That is, we continue to be unconscious of abstraction, or again in Korzybski's words, unsane. It's one of his favorite neologisms. He doesn't talk about sane. Yeah, he talks about sane, but he doesn't call us insane. He calls us unsane. We're not yet sane. We're somewhere between insanity and sanity, unsane. As a species, as a human species, as a human civilization as a whole, it's not a characteristic of any particular nation or ethnicity or ideology or philosophy. It's all unsane, human civilization as a whole. So the identification of label with object means that conceptualization dominates experience. The realm of experience, the life world, is thus narrowed, restricted, twisted, and damaged by conceptualization. We live then, says Korzybski, according to definitions. On page 9 of my book, I quote Korzybski talking about marriage. He talks about the misery that men and women get themselves into when they get married because they believe that they're going to be living according to some definition of marriage. And then as time goes on, maybe 1 week after the honeymoon, or maybe even the honeymoon itself is interrupted, they realize that the person they're living with is not a definition and cannot be summed up or encompassed or handled with any definition or simple set of definitions. So our whole lives are like this, according to Korzybski. We live according to definitions, and we don't know it. We don't know why so much suffering, why war, why ecological disaster. According to my introduction here, these pathologies of civilization, war, ecological disaster, crime, genocide, the list goes on. All of these are intrinsically related to the failures of consciousness of abstraction which characterize humanity. He's not saying that the cause of our pathologies is unconsciousness of abstraction. He's saying that unconsciousness of abstraction, aka copying animals, is intrinsically related, inherently and inextricably related with these pathologies of civilization. So speaking personally, I wouldn't say that if everyone read Science and Sanity 3 times over the next year and then became an expert at various practices of general semantics, I'm not saying humanity would achieve its, but I am saying that something like that is an essential prerequisite, an essential component of a movement towards a next stage of human civilization. Either this will happen or we'll be destroyed. Korzybski already saw that after World War I. Either there'll be progress towards a higher level of civilization or we can forget about it. And he called that the manhood of humanity. Of course, that's a sexist phrase now. So now we would talk about the adulthood of humanity. So we should move from the childhood of humanity to the adulthood of humanity. That's the ambition of general semantics is not to bring that about, because that would be grandiose, but to contribute to the bringing of that about. Back to this idea that the realm of experience is narrowed and restricted and twisted and damaged by conceptualization, we close off many of the possible richness and vividness of sensory experience. The domination by the concept means I don't see this, to go back to the example of marriage, I don't see this living, breathing, unpredictable, vulnerable, crazy human being that I call my wife. I see the scientific or religious or philosophical definition of wife. And whenever she doesn't live up to the definition of wife, you know what happens. And vice versa. It's just a metaphor for the fate of humanity. Obscuring the possibilities of new forms of experience. If we live according to definitions, if the label level dominates the object, if our sensory experience is completely immersed in and taken up into and identified with label level definitions and theories, then possibilities for new experience are obscured. Now there is a general semanticist who is not very popular in the movement because maybe he's so radical in his own way. He's very much involved in the problem of the looming ecological catastrophe, and has been for decades. And his name is Charles Andrew Hilgartner. And his website is at hilgart.org. And I'm quoting him here. I'm going to be quoting him a little bit here, as I do in my book, but it's a bit different here. He talks about what Korzybski calls unconsciousness of abstraction, which is a kind of tasteless term. He calls the lethal fundamental error. That's a bit more intense, isn't it? The lethal fundamental error of humanity. And I quote, anyone who is unconscious of abstracting his maps from the territory tacitly pretends to possess absolute certainty and is primed to play God. a most dangerous pretense. Humans have aspired to absolute certainty and repeatedly acted as if they had attained it, generating crises of war and ecocide. Hilgartner writes, some people in the 40s talked about the Einstein, Heisenberg, Korzybski uncertainty principle. Right? If you internalize the structural differential, you are internalizing the uncertainty principle because of the openness of the parabola at the top. You can never think, oh, I know what's going on, or I know what to do. You have to live with uncertainty. Whatever decisions you make have to be done in the light of uncertainty. Hilgartner writes, if we are not educated to make this distinction between map and territory, then we are in effect trained to not make it. And you could say, okay, conscious of abstraction, map is not a territory, yeah, sure, but we can somehow make up for that, with our good common sense, that the map is not the territory, then the map is not the territory. Many people will take as a kind of truism, or some kind of obvious statement of fact that is of no great immediate practical significance. But what Hilgartner emphasizes in his own way is that if we are not trained at an early age to make this distinction, these distinctions, it is as if we are trained not to make them. Korzybski placed a great deal of emphasis on teaching general semantics to children as early as possible in their life. He says it's very easy for children to learn general semantics because they don't already know God is solid. They don't already know socialism is bad. They don't already know there is no God. They don't know, so they're ready to learn stuff in a way that adults are not. It's not so hard for us to agree with that. So in Korzybski's words, human civilization is unsane, characterized by, and I quote, general infantilism, founded on strife, fights, brute competitions, space binding. Time binders act like space binders. They copy animals in their evaluational reactions. So the purpose of general semantics is to contribute, according to me, there are people in general semantics who say, not to worry. It's basically self-improvement and better language habits. But for radical general semantics, it is that. But more importantly, the purpose of general semantics is to contribute in a very important way to a radical transformation of human civilization in the direction of sanity towards the adulthood of humanity by training in consciousness of abstraction. So the main thing is not to read all of Science and Sanity 3 times. It's not to read the book of radical general semantics. The main thing is to train in consciousness of abstraction. And the most important vehicle of this training is the structural differential. Practice with the structural differential is of the utmost importance as it facilitates internalization of the difference between levels by the nervous system. Korzybski called it neurosemantic training. So it's not just words. It gets into your bones, your veins, etc., your whole neurology, your whole nervous system. It's a training of the brain-nervous system. It's not philosophy, although it doesn't exclude philosophy. The learning is neurological. He used that term also, neurological. Sometimes he says psychological, neurological. The learning happens at the object level. You don't just memorize linguistic formulations. You're learning directly, as much as possible, at the object level, sensory semantically. How? Well, you see the difference between the levels. You can feel the difference between the levels. If you have a 3-dimensional structural differential like this one, I'll show you later, it's even more facilitative. You can see and feel the difference between the levels while saying, silently or out loud, this is not this, this is not this. Korzybski believed that you could solve personal problems by slapping them onto the structural differential. So he worked a lot with individuals trying to do that. As they were talking about their problems, he would say, shh. He would say, this, what you're saying about your problems, is not the same as the actual experience of your problems. And what your actual experience of your problems is not the same as what someone else's experience of those problems is. And it's also not the same as what is going on in the eye of God, if you like. So you're seeing the differences, feeling the differences, while saying silently or out loud to yourself, this is not this. So if you now draw for yourself, with pen and paper, a structural differential, and you can copy what you have, or you can see how closely you can get to it from memory. Draw for yourself a structural differential with the event level, the object level, a bunch of label levels, ending up connecting at the top once again with the event level, with holes in the event level, with strings coming out of the event level, some of which do not reach the object level, with holes in the object level, with strings coming out of them, some of which do not reach the label level. You do that, you take a piece of paper, you draw a structural differential. As you do that, notice the silence in the room.
Mm-hmm.
You can multitask. As you notice the silence in the room, notice some sounds that you didn't hear while I was going blah, blah, blah. Sound of the air conditioner, sound of voices out in the hall, maybe the sound of the Pakistani Air Force flying over.
Never.
I asked my students to construct three-dimensional objects like this one, which gives you an even more direct sensory familiarity, neuro-semantic training with the structural differential. And I had my students one year, I had 20 students, they brought in 20 different versions of the structural differential, each one of them sort of distinctive in its own way. This is just the beginning of a practice of working with a structural differential so that you come to know the differences in depth, in your bones, neurosemantically, not merely verbally and superficially. So to summarize, here's the label level. Whatever you say it is not. Here's the event level. Whatever you experience it is not. Whatever I say about my experience is not my experience. And whatever my experience is not the same as what is going on behind my experience, beyond and behind my experience. So here's one consequence which might be disturbing, which should be disturbing. We can no longer say what anything is, or ask what anything is, simply. We can't say we can't ask what is justice. Sorry, Plato. We can't ask what is love. We have done away with the is of identity. We can't say any longer what anything is. But you will notice that I will continue to use that word a lot. But whenever I use it, I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm surrendering to a convention of the language for the sake of convenience. I no longer believe that what I say a thing is what the thing is. And I no longer believe that what I experience a thing as is the same as what it is at the event level. When I look at the blueness of the sky, I can't say, oh, but it really is blue, it's just that you can't see it. No. I can't say it really is blue. It really is blue to me. And there is a phrase that a lot of general semanticists have used, which is to-me-ness. Eunice. Now, you know, you can talk about terrorism, for example. You can say, well, he is a terrorist. Well, he is not a terrorist. You can argue about definitions of terrorism. Some of the definitions and debates will be more rational than others. But, and you can say that you already know what I'm going to tell you in a moment, and that is that terrorism is a word, a label, maybe a set of theories. So now we can ask ourselves, how do we want to use this word? It becomes actually a political question rather than a question of definition. How do we want to use this word? Maybe we don't, maybe we'd like to stop using it altogether so we can stop the bullshit. Maybe we can find other words that are more similar in structure to the diversity and variety of what is going on. We can no longer even say, this is a rose. Imagine I'm holding a rose in my hand. I can say this is a rose if I know what I'm doing when I say that. And I can no longer say the rose is red. That's the is of predication. General semantics attacks the is of identity, X is Y, and the is of predication, X has characteristic Y. Because it has that characteristic to my nervous system. A general semanticist wrote this letter once to Gertrude Stein in the journal, etc. Dear Gertrude, a rose, you remember Gertrude's famous statement, a rose? So this guy writes, or maybe not a guy, a rose is not a rose, dear Gertrude, until it meets the mind in thought. A rose is not a rose until it meets the mind in thought. So no more what is love, no more what is justice, no more what is freedom, no more what is democracy, no more does God exist. Because love, justice, democracy, and God are words. Not only that, they're words at a very high level of abstraction, which we read into what is going on at our peril. I'm not saying stop using the words. I'm saying know what you're doing when you use the words. That's consciousness of abstraction. Instead, we ask, how are these words used, and to what, if anything, in the world that is not words, do these words refer? Okay, so here's another exercise. You got your structural differential in front of you. So at the label level there, write a word. Hey, write the word word on the structural differential. Write the word word on the structural differential at the label level. And now look at the word as a series of marks at the object level. It is free of meaning. So for this little instant, you're free of meaning. When you look at the word as part of the world without words, you're free of meaning. And if that's hard, write it upside down. Or something like that. So you've taken the very same marks and by changing their, then you can see that they are marks on paper. They are at the object level. What this is just that. There's something very zen about this practice at the object level. It's just this. Okay? It's not word, it's just this. Now you can listen to the sound of the word. Word. What if you didn't understand English? Word. What the? How many different ways could the word be sounded? Word, word, word. Can it become a meaning-free piece of music? It just did. Word, word, word. This is partly what John Cage is doing in his radical music, if you know John Cage's work at all. You know what I'm talking about. He wanted to liberate sound per se from the dictates of musicology and musical theory and musical convention. And he did that as a Buddhist, but it's good general semantics practice at the silent level, which is what we're moving towards. We're moving rapidly towards it. This is something that I usually do in the very first class when I'm teaching general semantics. I put this on the board. What is this? What is this? Certainly you can tell me what it is. It's a very simple thing. It isn't. Well, no. In the code of Latin letters, it's the letter B. In the code of Arabic numerals, it's the letter 13. So what is it really? But what is it really? Beyond language, outside of any numerical or linguistic codes, what is this? What can you say? You can say, it's just those lines. It's just those lines. That's at the first label level of description. But it's still language. Even if you say it's just those lines, you're still using language. So this is where the pointer comes in, the index. You ask, what is this? You just say, you just point to it. That's what it is. Here's something Korzybski used to do, and I've done it sometimes in my classes. Korzybski did this. He would say to people, roll up your sleeves. So you roll up your sleeve, and you give yourself a really good pinch. Now try to describe it. Tell me the feeling. And you can't. You can't do it. It does no good to say sharp, dull, prickly, etc. Because the minute you use those words, you have to describe those, and so on, ad infinitum. The words will never get to the experience. The words will never get to the experience. The word pinch applies to the experience. But the word pinch will never get to the experience. And not only that, every experience is different. If I ask you to pinch this in the same place again, it won't be the same pinch, but it'll still be under the category of pinch. If you pinch a different part of your body, it'll be a different pinch. Context is also important. The pinch that someone gives you when they're teasing is different than the pinch someone gives you when they're actually trying to hurt you. The pinch your mother gave you when she was punishing you is different from the pinch your uncle gave you when he was trying to get you to use snuff. So every pinch is different. By the way, that particular example of the pinch exercise comes from another nice book on general semantics, which was written in the 40s, called The Levels of Knowledge and Existence by Harry Weinberg. Levels of Knowledge and Existence by Harry Weinberg. Repeating such practice will put consciousness of abstraction into your neurology, because we also have this power of metaphor. You know, one experience can stand for a whole range of experiences that are similar in structure. Once you've realized in your body that the label is not the object, this generalizes in your neurology from a tiny little experience with one pinch to a more general internalization of the difference between the levels of abstraction. The word pinch is still a very useful word. So again, we don't want to get rid of words. Later on we'll be talking about the devices of general semantics. I'll just briefly introduce you to this one now. It's called the index. You take the word pinch. We say pinch 1 is not the same as pinch 2, is not the same as pinch 3, is not the same as pinch, and then we use the mathematical notation in there because the series extends indefinitely. So you still have the concept of pinch, but it's put in its place. No longer dominates your understanding of pinch. It's put in its place, and that's the place that you put it in. At the first label level, descriptive. It's a good descriptive label, pinch, but it's not the same as the experience. The experience is different at every moment for every person at every time. But the word remains the same. Well, such practices also necessarily bring about a new recognition, which I just indicated, of the singularity of happenings. So we're no longer talking about reality, we're talking about happenings. and we have a new appreciation of the singularity of happenings. So, consciousness of abstraction tends to become automatic. Well, how would this affect our response to propaganda, for example? And not only propaganda, but propositions of all kinds. How would this simple practice and this simple device taught in grade 3, how would that affect humanity's relation not only to propaganda, which we can more or less see through given our even present equipment with difficulty, but to propositions of all kinds. And Korzybski, I quote from page 245 of Science and Sanity. When we arrive at the unspeakable character of the object, we will find that whatever we can see, smell, taste, handle, etc., is an absolute individual. That's what the index does. Every one of those is an absolute individual, a unique individual, and yet it comes under a concept without being dominated by that concept. What would the effect of consciousness of abstraction be on ethnic, racial, and other forms of prejudice? Just a question. If you really internalize consciousness of abstraction and the difference between these levels without being told anything about prejudice, okay, nobody's going to give you sensitivity training, nobody's going to tell you racism is bad, nobody's going to tell you all people are the same under the skin. They won't bother with the wonderful propaganda, and it is wonderful, but what good does it do? How deep does it go? People learn to repeat the words. Is that not so? So I'm suggesting that consciousness of abstraction and such practices as I'm now indicating, which are just a few of many possible practices, I'm raising the question, what would the effect of that be on ethnic, racial, and other forms of prejudice at ages 8, 9, 10, if your parents gave you the structural differential and a little bit of training with the structural differential, instead of giving you a lecture, racism is bad, hey, the concept of race is perhaps not abolished. Maybe it's revised as racialization. That's a recent interesting linguistic innovation. We're still working with language, but our relation with language is fundamentally transformed. Look at this now, because I'm moving on to a different topic which is essential for really grasping the structural differential, not understanding it, grasping it. But this might seem like a strange way of approaching the matter. Here's a question for you. There is 3 mistakes in this sentence. Okay, there's the subject of the experiment. Can you find the 3 mistakes in that sentence? Let's take a few minutes and see what people come up with. There is 3 mistakes in the sentence. Can you find them? Okay, well, I'll tell you. The first mistake is a spelling mistake.
No.
The second mistake is a grammar mistake.
This sentence.
And the third mistake,
There are only 2 mistakes.
that's right. The third mistake is that there are only 2 mistakes in it. So these are mistakes at different levels. The lowest level is spelling.
the third mistake.
That's right, the bishop found it.
A higher level is grammar. And the higher level still is, let's call it, framing. Or meaning of the sentence. So these 3 levels are distinct. And they're hierarchically related. Because grammar is at a higher level of abstraction than spelling. And meaning is at a higher level of abstraction than grammar. So we have 3 distinct levels, easily recognizable as such, and yet they all coexist simultaneously in the same sentence. So that is a metaphor for the relation between the levels of the structural differential. I'm going to demonstrate. So look, Here's the event level. Here's the object level. Here's the label levels. This shows their distinctness. And this shows their simultaneity. There it is. The event contains the object. The object inheres in the event. And the object contains the label. Language inheres in our sensory experience. As I showed before, we couldn't have language without sensory experience of sound and sight, etc., etc. So they are simultaneous. Not simultaneous, but nearly simultaneous. And here we see their separation. So we can put them together, we can take them apart, we can put them together and take them apart. The only real improvement we could make here is to somehow construct a structural differential in which the label would go into the object. Because what I did here is put the whole shebang into the event. If we could put all those labels into the object in the same way, and then the whole shebang into the event level, then that would be more, and here's a key phrase in general semantics, similar in structure to what is going on. Because that's what we want from language and from sensory experience. We want abstractions that do not tell us what is going on. We want linguistic formulations and sensory experiences which are similar in structure to what is going on. So this is a section on silent practice, or practice at the object level. Korzybski says, dwell always at the object level. Become an observer of your own experience. I would say, instead of become an observer of your own experience, I would say become an observer within your own experience. These practices immediately expand and deepen your attention to what is going on in sensory experience. Find out for yourself. Giving access to the vividness, richness of detail, complexity, and singularity of happenings at the object level. And they also, ideally, will open onto potentials of experience, usually not entering into awareness, all commonly obscured by conceptual domination of experience. These practices also separate, that is, differentiate, in your experience, right now, the two levels, sensory and conceptual. So there is that separation between sensory and conceptual, object and label. An example of silent practice derived from Korzybski's book, Science and Sanity, page 169, I think the 5th edition, pencil. So you focus your attention on the pencil, and you notice as much as you can characteristics which would ordinarily be ignored. Because it is, as Korzybski says, just a pencil, nothing to look at. Ordinarily, you would pay no attention to the color, the shape, the small scratches on its surface, etc., etc. I'm quoting from Korzybski. Then, feeling it, notice how it feels to manipulate it in various ways, beyond the mere feeling of holding it for the purpose of writing. Dropping it on the table, noticing what sound it can make. Perhaps, Korzybski says, it also provides a smell. How ridiculous. It's no longer a particular instance of the category pencil. It's no longer merely an example of the category pencil. So it's this kind of distinction. One of them is, we think of it as something we use, that we exploit. We don't really attend to it for its own sake. So this is the kind of distinction Korzybski is asking us to make here. It becomes singular, this unique sensory happening right now. And look, this unique sensory experience is not the same as this unique sensory experience, is not the same as this unique sensory experience. Each one of them is unique and singular. You know, every moment of life is unique and singular. In some Buddhist practices, you learn to attend to mere fractions of an instant of experience, each one different than the one preceding and the one following, you're not going to get to that level, but it's the same general principle at work. Well, so the moments of your own life, each one of them is also unique and singular. Now consider the implications for society and politics. Okay, a minute ago I was asking you to listen to the sound of a pencil dropping on the table. And now I'm going to talk about the implications for society and politics. And you're thinking, what possible implications for society and politics could there be? Well, Ronald Reagan, the former president of the United States, when he was governor of California, he started out, as an actor, a movie actor, and then he became the leader of the Screen Actors Guild, a union of movie actors. Then he became governor of California. Then he became president of the United States. Who is Ronald Reagan? Ronald Reagan is different at every one of those moments. Very different, in fact. So Ronald Reagan, when he was governor of California, responded to a concern about the fate of the ancient redwood forests in California with these words. He said, well, if you've seen one redwood, you've seen them all. Okay? Get the implications? Here's another example closer to what you might call actual politics. The General of the United States Army, I used to know his name, who was in charge of the internment of the Japanese during World War II, including Japanese Americans, citizens of the United States, born in the United States. When he was confronted with some concern about that, he said, and I quote, "Could be that this is not true, but this is a quote that has come down to me. A Japanese is a Japanese is a Japanese." So there you have right away, the implications of the index for politics, of silent practice for politics. Because Japanese 1 is not the same as Japanese 2, is not the same as Japanese 3. And yet we're not abolishing the identity Japanese, which is important to the Japanese. We're not abolishing that. We're not saying to Japanese 1, hey, you have nothing in common with Japanese 2. You have a lot in common as Japanese, but you are a unique, singular, living, breathing human being who happens also to fit into the classification Japanese. So every happening at the object level is unique and transitory. It's passing. Everything is passing. Now here's another exercise, which we can do now. Focus your attention on your breathing, the inhalation, and the exhalation. The inhalation, and the exhalation. Whoa, what a relief. Just a single breath in and out is a relief, is it not? The inhalation, filling up the body, and the exhalation, coming out of the body. Notice the complex sensations of one breath at the object level. Do you pay attention often to your breathing? Maybe some of you do, as some kind of practice, but most people don't usually pay much attention at all to their breathing. It's just there. But if you pay attention to the breathing, you notice, first of all, how different each breath is to the preceding one and the following one. And second of all, what complex set of sensations is involved there, all the way through the inhalation and the exhalation. So you notice the complex sensations of one breath. And there's a pause there at the end of the breath, at the end of the exhalation, there's a pause, is there not? That's the end of one lifetime. And with the beginning of the next breath, another lifetime begins. Is the second breath the same as the first? Can we say that breath 1 is the same as breath 2? I don't think so, but it's awfully similar.
Yeah.
So isn't the first one gone? Okay, that was 2 breaths. Take a third breath. So aren't the first 2 gone? They're totally gone. And the body that was taking those breaths, is that one not gone also? Is it possible to have the same body with different breaths? I don't think so. So body breath 1 is gone, body breath 2 is gone, body breath 3 is gone. And if you attend to this process, which is nothing other than the process of living and dying, then there's also this attention to the vividness and the richness and the complexity of the sensation of breathing. The concepts body, mind, and breath at the label level are stable. The concept body is stable. The concept breath is stable. The experiencings are transitory. That's one of the main differences between the label level and the object level. The words, the concepts are like fixed in stone, at least for centuries, but the happenings are transitory. These practices also demonstrate that the label level constructs complex experiences as pencils, breaths, pinches. I use this to show the way they're usually identified, and that's inescapable and okay in our experience, as long as we also separate them in order to come back. And what I just said was that these practices show how the label level actually constructs our experiences at the object level. So it's not as if you get to a pure object level that is completely free of construction by language. You move in that direction. You never really get there. The word pencil, the concept pencil, gives us much of our experience of the object pencil. Almost all of our experience of the object pencil. We got a definition of a pencil, we know what it's for, but when we do this, we can pay attention to the pencil for its own sake, and hey, we can even figure out all kinds of ways of using the pencil, which never occurred to us before, like hammer out the rhythm on the table, to impersonate a walrus. There are all kinds of uses of the pencil which never occur to you in your ordinary experience. And so therefore you can also see how silent practice shows how language constructs experience, and it also opens certain possibilities of creativity, which is what I just did, although I didn't get as many laughs as I was hoping for. Hey, and the pencil need not be used for any purpose at all. It may just be allowed to happen, as it were, for itself. That's what some artists are trying to get to, say, when they'll mount a pencil on an easel, hang it on the wall, and write like, "This is not a pencil," or something like that. So you see that silent practice can be said to open the aesthetic dimension. Now, in brackets here, I said, "Bring cookies." But I actually didn't do that, but I was thinking, if I brought cookies, we could all have some cookies and practice at the silent level with the cookie. In other words, not just jam it into our mouths and consume it, but look at it, compare it with other cookies, see all the small differences on the surface of the cookie, break it into our fingers, see how it crumbles, eat it slowly as in meditation on taste, and experience the cookie at the object level as an example of silent practice. Take 3 minutes, take some object, any so-called object. Do this kind of thing with the object for 3 minutes. Experience it in every sensory modality. What can you experience that you ordinarily would not notice? And promise yourself that even though it seems like a trivial exercise, this will have an effect on your brain nervous system, which will enrich your experience and open you to possibilities of creativity that would not otherwise have arrived. So now we repeat the experiment in another way. Take, for example, the pencil again. Look, feel, touch, etc. the pencil as before, but this time notice also the thoughts, the words, and the images that come to mind. Now, someone was asking me before what to do about images, where to place them on the structural differential. Well, in the context of this exercise, I would put them at the label level, because they are coming to mind and sort of interfering with our experience at the object level right here and now. But in another context, I might put the images at the object level. Here I'm putting them at the label level. All right, notice the thoughts, the words, the images that come to mind, which distract you from attending to the object, or perhaps simply accompany your attention to the object. Now, some of these thoughts, images, etc. will be directly related to the characteristics of the object. For example, you may hear yourself saying to yourself, "My, this feels smooth." There'll be some other thoughts or related images that come to mind that will be irrelevant, which you can report to your psychoanalyst. So in this version of the exercise, your attention is equally divided, more or less, between the object and the so-called distractions. Now I'm saying to you that you spend another 2 minutes doing that. So first you spend 3 minutes just attending to the object, the sensory experience, what you see, hear, feel, smell, taste, move, that kind of thing. And in this second installment of the practice, you divide your attention between attention to the level of sensory experience and awareness of the thoughts, images, etc. that are coming to mind that are distracting you from the object level. Now this version of the experiment, somewhat like the previous one, facilitates internalizing the distinction between label and object. Because you're noticing, hey, this is the object, and these are the thoughts that are coming to mind. Usually they'd be all mixed up together. So in this version of the practice, you're noticing them both, but you're also noticing the difference between the two. So you're internalizing further the distinction between label and object that is conveyed by the structural differential. And this is equally important, when you do both of these versions of the practice, you are being introduced to the practice that Korzybski calls the thalamo-cortical pause, otherwise known as the pause, or thalamo-cortical delay, otherwise known as the delay. There's a whole chapter in the book of Radical General Semantics on that, which is rather difficult, which you can read at your own leisure. So look, if I am observing the object, that's the arrow of observation. Okay, so here's the arrow of observation, and there's the object. And here are distractions coming from the label level. So I'm giving attention to the sensory experience of the object, say the pencil. I'm also giving some attention, or allowing some attention, to the distractions from the label level, thoughts, images, memories. And as I'm doing that, I'm aware of the gap, or pause, if you like, between those two sectors, if you wish, of my experience. So I become aware, consciously, of the meaning and or incipient behavior. I'm going to go over this a bit because it's a bit dense. You were just about to believe or act on. Like, I'm looking at this, I'm just about to believe that it's a pencil. Without the practice, I just believe that it's a pencil. But with this practice, I become aware of I delay the reaction that identifies it as a pencil. Or if it's a matter of intention to act, if I'm on the road and some idiot is blocking me, and I'm just about to believe that he is a moron who deserves to be punished, and I'm just about to fall into the action of screaming at him and getting arrested and spending a few nights in an Indian jail, which I'm not looking forward to, or any jail for that matter, then there's also a pause, which enables me to delay that reaction. We might almost put here semantic reaction, which is a phrase in general semantics, which means a meaning-making reaction, an evaluative reaction. I'm able to delay the leap, which is usually immediate, instantaneous, between a sensory experience and an evaluation at the label level, or an intention to act at the behavioral level, has something to do with the ability to delay decisions, to take some time, to pause, to assess possible consequences. I learned to become consciously aware of the meaning and or incipient behavior that I was just about to believe or act on a fraction of a second. Korzybski says, a fraction of a second is often all you need in order to be able to delay your reaction, to refuse to identify object and label, or to refuse to leap into a particular way of evaluation or of action. Because you're able to observe it before you lose yourself in it, before you identify with it. Now, so there's the delay. Later on, when we work with the devices, which are purely linguistic practices, we'll see that they also have the effect of teaching you to delay your reactions just by changing the language that you use, just by changing the linguistic formulations that you use. And a fraction of a second of psychological delay is what Korzybski hopes will be installed permanently in your brain nervous system so that it happens without you having to decide to do it. Now, usually, you know, when we were brought up anyway, we were told to count to 10. Were you told to count to 10? Didn't work very well for me. I think maybe for some people it works, count to 10. When I was told to count to 10, I just counted to 10 and then did what I was going to do or believed what I was going to do anyway. Right? So this is a little bit different because it's my unconscious capabilities that are being recruited rather than having some kind of conscious policy forced on my brain against my will. Who wants to count to 10? This gives you the opportunity to revise or refuse the impending belief and or action which otherwise would have overtaken you or taken you over. So when Korzybski advises you to become an observer of your own experience, again I would say an observer within your own experience, he means especially that you observe and therefore are in a position to revise your semantic reactions, which gives you this great benefit of greater, what he calls conditionality of response. So the more consciousness of abstraction, the more practice at the silent level, the greater your degree of conditionality of reaction. Every situation can be dealt with appropriately as the unique situation that it is. That's a statement of an ideal, but it's a matter of approaching that sort of situation. I swear if I had 400 years, I could really get good at this. Democracy, with the consciousness of abstraction, we're better able to govern ourselves individually and collectively because we're going to be more aware of the changes of experience that are actually going on in our lives, and these can inform our policies as individuals and as collectives, and that we will see many different possibilities. It's not simply a matter of the 9 blind men and the elephant, a story which you all know. It's not simply a matter of bringing different parts of a situation together so that we can all form a consensus. It's more a matter of accepting that there may be 2 or 3 or 6 or 12 or 15 equally plausible notions of unexplored possibilities of policy making that cannot all be implemented at once. So there's some necessity for choice still there that is not solved through simple observation. So that observation at the object level, silent practice, as a democratic practice, opens up the possibilities for greater variation of potential policies, and therefore for a greater amount of debate, and therefore the need for a greater amount of tolerance. But it's also very scary because at some point it's necessary to draw the line and say, okay, we have too many possibilities here to deal with. So there has to be a, what they call in parliamentary democracy, closure. There has to be a resolution of closure. That's the end of debate, and somehow a policy has to be decided on. But in terms of creativity then, so there will be, in all likelihood, be many different ways of connecting the dots of experience. As the physicist-philosopher David Bohm argues in his book on creativity, which I recommend, new possibilities of living, etc., are not right there. In other words, you don't find them through simple practices of observation at the object level. They're not right there. Originality and creativity emerge over time from the practices of giving attention. I don't want to promise you that if you practice dwelling at the silent level, that you'll immediately see possibilities that are right there that you were ignoring, because they won't be right there. They emerge in a complex matter out of the habit of what he calls giving simple attention itself. And he says that this is the primary creative act. It's the sort of source of creativity, is giving simple attention. Well, the advice there is to practice giving simple attention to what is going on at the level of sensory experience without expecting that immediately to point to new possibilities or to solve your problems. In other words, a certain degree of faith is called for there. A certain amount of trust in possibilities of the future as emergent